Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the work session for the month of October 2019. The Board of Commissioners did meet in executive session from 6:30 to 7 to discuss both real estate and a personnel-related matter. If you could all please rise and join our Deputy Chief Joe Hagan in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Joe. We start off this evening with two presentations, the first of which is from Mark Pennington, and I don't see Mark in the audience. So is he, anybody know whether,
Andy, I'm just guessing that since we took the ordinance,
okay, he's going to come next month?
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, so we have one presentation. So you have twice as much time, Peter. Peter Poglianese, from the chairman of our Environmental Advisory Committee, is going to update us on the Climate Action Plan and other initiatives. So thank you for being here, Peter.
It's my pleasure. Let me get the presentation up here. So I'm going to start just with a little bit of a recap on where we've been recently and why we have an addendum proposed for the Climate Action Plan. You're familiar with all of this. So the original climate plan dates back to 2009, and the original resolution setting goals for a 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Things were sort of settled in between then and 2017, and I think everybody picked it up a notch, including the board, including EAC, and the community interest increased in 2017. So you all passed a resolution urging state and federal action in 2017. EAC did an update of the baseline of the greenhouse gas emissions. And we found some reduction in the municipal sector. Most of the progress was really driven by cleaner power on the grid. So and we proposed to do some things. I think the board had some good ideas about what to do, and the administration had some good ideas about what to do. And so additional measures were taken. The update looking at those measures showed a 55% greenhouse gas reduction for the municipal sector as of 2018. So as far as the township meeting, it's part of the goal versus the 30% reduction. Yes, it was done. The one thing that we have a lot less control over, obviously, is what the community does, what residents do, what the business community does, right? The data does not look great for the community. So energy consumption actually went up between 2005 and 2015 in the community. Greenhouse gas emissions went down 6%, primarily due to cleaner power generation on the grid. So not really much that the community has done to make headway, although individuals notwithstanding, some people are doing quite a bit. But by and large, it's been a little bit hard to move the bar on a voluntary basis, and I think that's one of the reasons why the board looked to state and federal action as important. They are important. But absent that, I think what we're doing here in the township and what other townships are doing is also very important. So among the things that the township has done has been to obtain Sustainable Pennsylvania Gold certification. So that is a certification process based on things that we're doing for sustainability in general, including climate. And we are in a pretty limited company with gold certification. I think Lower Merion, I think Philadelphia. I think there's only one or two. There's a platinum certification, and I think there are only 2 communities in Pennsylvania that have achieved platinum. We are on the road to getting Soul Smart certification, and what that is just a simple make it easy for homeowners and installers to permit and install solar systems on their home. So that's in process. We're expecting bronze certification until the online permit system is in place, and then that should go up. As you know, there are electric vehicle charging stations, both for township use and public use, in the corner of the parking lot. And that was installed with the help of state grants, as well as a township investment in it. And the township has purchased its first electric vehicle for the parking enforcement, which is parked out there right now, charging. Now, EAC, for its side of things, we have worked with an organization called Ready for 100, which is an initiative of the Sierra Club, to get them to launch what we call Solarize Southeastern Pennsylvania. So that is basically an environment that makes it easier for homeowners to assess and decide and pull the trigger to install solar on their home. So we have pre-screen candidates. We look at whether they have adequate sun, whether the roof conditions are appropriate. We have selected qualified contractors. They have given us discounted pricing. And so there's also volume discounts. So that's something that's available to the community and throughout really I think the 4 counties to the west and north of Philadelphia. So we've redoubled our outreach. We've done, we have done workshops. We will continue to do workshops. I want to thank the commissioners that have sent out information on all of these things to their constituents. That's probably the most important piece of this, okay, is getting people to move out in the community. Okay, and one of the reasons why we want the township to do so much is because you want a visible example of it's not rocket science. We can do it, you can do it, right? So that's something we want to continue. And we also have had a dialogue with the Regional Planning Commission, and there is something very interesting going on with DVRBC, which hopefully will come to fruition within the next year, that might make it possible for the township to participate in a regional solar electric field at a very good cost. So stay tuned for that. So what we learned in the last 2.5 years is it's actually easier for municipal government operations to make progress. We have control over it. We know that there's a significant return on investment for all the money that we've spent, right? LED, renewable power. We don't have the data yet, but I venture to say that the electric vehicles are going to be cheaper total cost of ownership than virtually any other vehicle that we have. But 100% of everything, 2050, is actually a very, very heavy lift. It's hard for the township. It's going to be hard for the world at large, right? Because that means both transportation and heating. Okay, so that is, a lot of people look at climate and they say, well, gee, but that's the future. Well, so many of these things are not. They're here now. Solar has been on people's homes for 15, 20 years. Electric vehicles have been out there. But probably that last bit of the 100% is going to be really, really difficult. So this is where we're at, and then the question is, how do we get even township-wide to 30%? Because we're not there yet. And then we just updated our goals, right? So we have a resolution that says we're going to get 100% clean renewable electricity by 2035. That's actually the easy lift. And then by 2050, 100% renewable energy for everything, okay? It's a little more difficult. So why an addendum? Well, our plan from 2008 doesn't say anything about our new goals, and it doesn't say anything about how to get there, okay? So that's very simple. So, you know, here we are in terms of our status in the community, 6% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. How do we get to the big numbers that we're talking about? So this addendum is really just a lookout over the next couple of years. So we don't have the answer as to how do we get to, as a community, to 2035, and how do we get to 2050. So one of the pieces of this plan is, well, that's got to be on the long-term agenda, is to figure out how do we get there. What we did with the addendum is we reflected the current goals, and we introduced some actions that we can take within the next couple of years. So that was the purpose of the addendum. So, and these slides are basically in the addendum, which you should all have, right? So energy efficiency studies. Now, some of this is already underway, so the figures may not match what we really need. And Dave and Amy probably know better what those numbers should be, what the total numbers should be. We suggested $150,000 to implement low-hanging fruit, simply because, and this is in terms of energy efficiency, which is really the biggest bang for your buck of any of the things that we're talking about, is energy efficiency, because we know we have some low-hanging fruit, even in the modern buildings that we have, in terms of how to operate them efficiently, right? And then in terms of the stadium, we have probably the biggest power load and power cost of any of the buildings. And there's a lot of technology that we know can fit into that application, okay? And then we also suggested budgeting for a new long-term action plan. Why? Because this addendum really doesn't look out that far to 2035 and to 2050. It's only looking a little bit over the horizon. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be next year. It could be the year after that. At some point, we're going to have to cross that bridge, which is how do we get there? Okay. Non-budget recommendations, reestablish the green team. I think essentially we agreed that we probably have done that with quarterly climate meetings between administration and EAC. We recommended a single contractor for all HVAC maintenance for the 3 major facilities at least. Why? Because we have individual contracts and we have no performance clauses in those contracts. And that's one of the reasons why we don't have as good a performance as we could have with these buildings. So we have training, we have develop an RFP for our next contract when the current electricity contract expires. Take a look at what some of the other townships are doing. Lower Merion is purchasing the hybrid police interceptor utility vehicles. They had a total fleet analysis done, which really shouldn't be significantly different from our total fleet needs. So let's look at those and let's learn from that. Make maximum use of the grants that we have. So we have grants that we've already tapped into for electrical vehicle charging stations. we can tap into grants for additional cost for non-traditional fuel vehicles. The comprehensive plan, that's something that we really want to do. We want to look at whatever we build in the future in this community, what should it look like? From an energy efficiency standpoint, from an electric vehicle charging standpoint, what should it look like? And so this planning exercise that we're going through is very, very important. Do we go for, instead of the International Building Code, which is adopted by the state, do we go with the Green International Building Code, which is going to give us more energy efficient building? So those are the kinds of things that we want to look at in the comprehensive plan. And then outreach to the community. This is probably the most important thing because this is where we haven't moved the bar. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is show people, hey, this isn't rocket science. You know, it's very doable for everybody. But change comes hard to most people. You know, it's what's between the ears. That's the hardest thing in the world to move. And I have been I've been an environmental engineer for 38, 39 years. And I mean, I wasn't buying renewable energy until 10 years ago. I just purchased my first electric car. So I understand change is hard for everybody. So how do we get there? How do we model it? How do we promote it? How do we make it easier for people to make those decisions? That's really the hard part of this whole thing. So the path forward, we know some of these items, but what we're talking about with DVRPC is maybe a regional scale 50 megawatt solar field like Philadelphia and SEPTA just did. You read it in the paper. So what we're hoping is DVRPC develops a similar one that other townships can join and counties can join. So stay tuned for that. Why aren't we building solar? Why a PPA? Why don't we just build solar? Well, you guys know that from all the discussions about these buildings. Why didn't we put solar on it? We have no tax incentives for spending our money to install solar, so the economics are actually better for a power purchasing agreement. So that's why we're talking about that. Transportation, I think all electric, certainly vehicles, that's an easy one. Large trucks, the interim measure is really propane. So trash, heavy trucks could be propane today. When are we going to have all the promised full-size electric vehicles? I don't know. SEPTA is just starting to get fully electric buses. So that's hopefully coming. So how do we move the community? You know, we're trying to be an example. I think you guys could all be examples. I know how hard it is because I have very good friends I have spent hours with discussing things like electric vehicles and solar power. So I think the only way to break down the barriers is to be visible about it and talk about it and communicate it actively. So I do want to say a word about Solarize. We are going to have more Solarize workshops. We are Saturday, October 26th, and I'll get you information about it. We're going to have an open house in Westgate Hills. Noel Smith is going to open up his house, and he's had solar on his house probably for 10 years. And he's the guy with 3 Teslas. So, you know, hopefully together we can look at doing that as a long-term objective to move the whole community. So I'll be happy to answer any questions about the addendum and anything else. I want to thank you all for all you've done over the last couple of years. Your support has been invaluable.
Thank you for your leadership and vision, showing us the path forward and helping to protect the environment. We appreciate your role and also that of the EAC. It's been an invaluable resource to this board, so we thank you for your efforts.
Peter. Is the EAC reaching out to the school district of, another way of educating people is to get it to their kids?
We have endeavored to, we haven't had a tremendous amount of success yet. I haven't personally been involved in that. The history has been that the township has actually had better luck getting cooperation with the school district than EAC has. So maybe we could use your help in that regard. They seem very willing to partner on things like the stormwater detention at Chatham Park School. We can talk about how maybe we could get the township. There was one thing that we floated in the addendum, which was a shared resource. So one of the things that is really difficult is running these building management systems, although I've learned about sort of the institutional obstacles to running the building management system, which is proprietary software. They have many buildings, they have building management systems, you know, they have a need for energy efficiency as well. So maybe a shared resource of someone with a higher level of expertise would be appropriate. That's something that the township could have a discussion with them about. Shared, you know, you're doing an energy efficiency study on 3 fairly substantial facilities. You know, I don't know what they've done in terms of energy efficiency studies for their facilities, but that's a question. How efficiently are they operating? We have taken a peek at the data for some of the facilities, and as we talked about for some of the township facilities, there were some surprises, which is surprise but not surprising. There was an article in the Inquirer recently about, well, why are the lights on in half of the skyscrapers in downtown Philadelphia? Well, it's a question of who's minding the store and who's paying attention, and is it anywhere near the top or even the middle of anyone's list. So that's part of the problem with this operational question.
Any other questions? Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is any commissioner committee updates?
As far as finance goes, one of the things under consideration tonight for us to schedule a vote on for next week is the adoption of township debt policy. I'm working with Amy, and we'll report back to everybody this week on very minor suggestions to this policy. It is a policy that comes from a standard that the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States suggests, and then it's just slightly tweaked to be more specific to our township. So this is a finance thing in particular that we'll be dealing with this week.
Yeah, thank you for your involvement. Next up is the crime update. Deputy Chief Joe Hagan.
Good evening. We had 34 criminal arrests, 1 juvenile arrest, 202 traffic citations, 48 non-traffic citations, 296 warnings, and 327 parking tickets. During the month, we had 1 burglary, which occurred in the 600 block of Valley View Road. This burglary was discovered by excellent police work by Officers McDermott, Parrish, and McGibney. The residents weren't aware that the house had been burglarized. As a result of these officers stopping 2 individuals going through cars over in the Ardmore section, they had property on them, and they were able to track that property back to that house and clear that burglary with 2 arrests. We had one burglary attempt that occurred in the 2400 block of Merwood back on September 5th. A subject tried smashing the front window pane, and fled when confronted by one of the residents. That subject was apprehended within a few hours and confessed to doing the crime. We had 2 aggravated assaults, 1 sex offense, which was an indecent exposure. It occurred up at Haverford College. A male exposed himself to a woman on the nature trail. We had 1 vehicle theft, which was taken by the owner's, the boyfriend took the owner's car and did not return the vehicle. Once again, we had thefts from vehicles. There was at least 7 thefts or theft attempts. Seems that that number's down, which is hopefully people are getting the message about locking their doors and taking their property with them. We had 3 bike thefts and 9 canine usages. And that's it for the month.
Thank you, Joe. Looking at next week's agenda, we have 4 ordinances to consider, the first of which is ordinance number P17, 2019, traffic, second reading. This is in the 5th Ward. Any questions or discussion on this proposed ordinance? Next ordinance is number P21, 2019, fire losses, first reading. I'd ask our Township Manager, Dave Berman, to please provide the board with a brief description of this proposed ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. President. The state legislature back in the 1992-94 timeframe amended the insurance company law to allow municipalities to create regulations for the deposit or escrow of insurance proceeds from certain fire loss claims so that the township could collect any delinquent taxes and fees. And also if the township had to incur any costs for the removal, repair, or securing of a insured building or structure that was damaged by fire. And so this ordinance would allow the township to comply with state law and take advantage of the state law so that if there is a fire loss in the township and the building or structure is insured, the township could escrow the money and be sure to capture any costs that might be incurred by the township and also collect any back taxes or fees. There's a procedure set forth in the ordinance, and it all is handled by the township administration, and it's all fairly routine. Many of the communities around us already have the ordinance: Radnor, Lower Merion, Upper Merion, Marple, Springfield, and so forth. And so this is a little bit of a housekeeping item. We would ask the board to adopt the ordinance and then ultimately file the ordinance with the Department of Community and Economic Development so that when there is a fire loss, the insurance company would know to approach the municipality to proceed as set forth in the ordinance.
Thank you, David. Mr.
Berman? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The gun, do we?
Go ahead.
Time for questions?
Yes, time for questions.
The $7,500 threshold, is that standard? That seems low.
It's set forth in the statute that way.
Okay.
Do we have any discretion, or?
Yeah, but right, it's set forth in the Pennsylvania statute, but can we make that threshold any higher if we're going to adopt this ordinance?
Defer to the solicitor on that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I'll find out for you. Get back to you tomorrow. I do know that in most of the other towns that were mentioned that it's set at the 7,500 as per the enabling law, but I don't know if we can move any higher. But I will check it and get back to you.
I had looked at it when Mr. Berman had sent it to the ordinance committee, and I didn't believe we could. I think the state law pretty much specifies what we have to do. Looking at other municipalities, they've all done the same.
Yeah, I know. I'm
It's
familiar.
pretty much
you know,
a standard uniform standard.
I'm familiar with a couple of the other surrounding townships, and I know they're at 7,500. So my guess is that it's probably set by the state at that.
But is this something up until now that we've opted out of?
It's something that the insurance companies, when there's a loss, would look at the Department of Community and Economic Development list of municipalities that have adopted the ordinance, and then they would be required to follow the ordinance. So I wouldn't say that we've opted out of it. In fact, it's possible that we followed this very procedure. It's just that adopting the ordinance requires the insurance company to follow the procedure that's set forth.
Any other
No, that's not good enough for me. As of right now, if there's a fire loss in our township, does any insured, does State Farm, if my garage burns down, have to go to a township official and get some certification before I can get paid for a fire loss on my own property?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, and is that because we have failed to follow the law in Pennsylvania, or is that because we've just not yet done what Pennsylvania provides in terms of, an opportunity for a township? Well, so if we can opt out and do nothing, it makes no sense to me that we couldn't also mess around with the threshold here. I think $7,500 is low. But unless you guys tell me right now that we have a problem with, with fire damage not being, fixed, thus incurring township costs and stuff, it just seems to me, I'm sure that number was established a long time ago and doesn't really fit into modern, to modern values of property with regard to fire. And if 25,000 is more correct, or 20, or 17.5 over 7,500, I would like us to at least examine that.
It's a good point. I will look at it.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Jim, thank you.
Why would you want it to be higher?
I was just going to say,
I'm sorry.
Because this could interfere with this, with somebody getting paid. The insurer, if I'm reading this, they can't pay the beneficiary until the township has certified something.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, that is putting an impediment between so if you have $7,499 of damage from fire, you get your check the next day. State Farm shows up and 2 days later you get a check. We're introducing now an impediment to that, and the threshold is 7,500. I think that's too low, considering what we're trying to prevent, which is the cost incurred with an abandoned building or something like that turns out to be insured, or an absentee landlord who tries to collect from Utah for a property they have here. The township has had to deal with a lot of collateral expenses associated with the fire. So, I mean, there's nothing magic about 7,500 except that I just think it's low for purposes of the harm we're trying to fix.
Well, isn't part of the harm is making sure that we get taxes reimbursed for the expenditure?
This isn't to cover the reimbursement of a typical person having a fire in their home. This is to deal very specifically with abandoned properties, blighted properties, right? I mean, am I correct about that?
It's also dealing with if there are any back fees or taxes, it enables the township to send a bill to the insurer. So the insurance company would realize there was a loss, and if there were back taxes or fees, the township could recover those fees prior to the issuance or the payment of the policy proceeds to the insured.
I mean,
Not if it's $7,499 of loss, just if it's $7,500.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah, I'd like to find out if we can make the number different,
so-
or we're stuck with it. If we're stuck with it, that's easy. If we're not stuck with the number, we can have a debate about whether the number should be higher.
but I mean, I guess my point would be if we're owed back taxes or we're owed back fines or whatever, I mean, don't we still want to collect that even if the payout from the insurance company is
Well, this is
75?
just fire. I mean,
7,520?
do you want to add a tree going through a roof? You want to add, should we ask the IRS to give us a share of anybody's tax?
That's not part of the state
Right, but I mean, I don't know, you say all the time that you don't want to get in the way of the good in the way of perfect. Like, this is something we can collect back taxes if they're owed. But, I mean, that doesn't mean we have to do everything else. This is what the law is allowing.
The balance is that we add an impediment, people collecting on their fire insurance. And I just want to make sure that the number that's set at is a value judgment. The value judgment was made that it was 7,500. I'd like to know when that judgment was made, 7,500, because 7,500 in 1982 is a lot different from $7,500 in 2019.
The act was amended on October 13th, 1994, and specifically provides for the 7,500 as the minimum, so that the amount recoverable for a fire loss under all policies must exceed. It was amended then by the legislature from 5,000 to 7,500.
25 years ago.
And that's where they have left it.
Yeah.
So that's,
Let them amend it.
Low.
Okay, I'll take a look.
Okay, any other questions or discussions?
send you the link to this now.
Next ordinance under consideration, ordinance number P 22, 2019, and traffic first reading. Establishes special purpose parking as well as rescinding special purpose parking in a number of wards in the township. Anybody have any question about this particular?
I think a couple of them are the sixth ward, and
Yeah.
I'm fine with.
Anybody else have any questions or discussion? Okay, next ordinance, P 23, 2019, Old Marple Road, right-of-way, first reading. I'm going to ask Kelly Kirk, our zoning officer, to give us, this is kind of a house cleaning item, a long, kind of outstanding item that we'd like to clear up.
Old outstanding item that I think everybody would be happy to clear up. When we did the Haverford Reserve development, there were some roadway improvements to help with traffic mitigation, including the repositioning of Marble Road. When that was done, there was a section of what was previously Marble Road, part of that right-of-way, that was intended to be granted to the homeowner on the corner of Darby and Marple. At this point, that portion of property is in limbo, and we are just trying to grant the homeowners that portion of property that we had promised them back in 2007.
The impediment has been the state dealing with it, and the homeowner has been beyond patient. It has been a decade plus, and they've essentially maintained that area. So this is clearing something up and doing something good to get it into private hands who will maintain it.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Dan. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, now we turn to resolutions next week. Resolution number 2160, 2019, adoption of the township debt policy. This is formalizing our policy to provide a structure and a strategy regarding the issuance of debt. And Commissioner Holmes referred to this earlier. I don't know whether our Director of Finance and Assistant Township Manager Amy Cuthbertson would like to add anything at this point.
Commissioner Holmes and I will continue to fine tune this before it comes before the board, possibly next week at your Tuesday meeting. But the genesis of this was in anticipation of any future borrowing. As I've said in the past, we're trying to get our house in order, get some policies in place that are favorable to bonding agencies, and this is one of them. So working with our financial advisor, PFM, they had suggested some wording that we expanded upon and tweaked for our situation, and that's what Commissioner Holmes and I will fine tune before next week's meeting.
Great, thank you.
And so people understand what it is, just we're basically, we do set out some specific rules that we agree to live by, and we can put in exceptions to those rules where a majority of the board says in that specific circumstance for specific reasons we can vary from that standard we set. I mean, the good news is that nothing in here really isn't anything we haven't already started to do, but Ms. Cuthbertson and the bond rating agencies both have the good sense to realize there always won't be 9 of us smart people up here making all these decisions, so maybe we should write them down and bind future boards. So I'm working with
So they
her
change
on
it.
tweaking. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Holmes, and thank you, Amy. Next resolution is number 2161, 2019, fee schedule amendment. There's only one change to the fee schedule. That's on page 10 with regard to our electric vehicle charging station. On the private side, there was a 3-month grace period where it was free. And now we are, at the recommendation of Amy and also I think with input from the EAC, recommending a $1 an hour per recharging a fee, and our actual cost is 12 cents per kilowatt hour. So we're making a little bit of money. We're also trying to recoup our capital investment. So also the second part of this is if they stay connected 30 minutes after their charge is complete, there would be a surcharge added, which actually the machine adds to the cost. And then they get beyond 4 hours. I think Joe starts ticketing, right, Joe? So, yeah, so. Are there any changes, any questions about those suggested changes to the fee schedule? Okay. One thing that's not on the agenda, which will be for next week, is a purchase. I think everybody on the board was copied. This is with regard to our brine operation. our brine machine. We make brine, which is supplied prior to any anticipated heavy snowfall. And we make brine and sell it both to Marple and to Darby. And our brine machine is in need of both electrical and technical upgrades. And the quote that we got was $32,661.08. So this is something we need to act on probably next week, just to get our brine machine up and ready in anticipation of what may come. I don't know whether you have
That's a
anything to
very
add.
important item there, Andy.
I'm sorry?
That's a very important item there, that brine machine.
Yeah, so we'll add that, if it's okay with everybody, we'll add that to the agenda for purchase next week. It's not in the budget, but Amy's found money, right? Somehow. So, any other input? Perfect. Okay. Looking at, under Finance Department, the stipulation between the settlement between Delaware County Court of Common Pleas, a case involving the Falcon Center in Westchester Pike, with the school district, the county, and the township, and the owner. The owner had filed an appeal of their tax assessment, and those four parties came to a resolution of that out of court and without going to the Board of Assessment. So it'll result in a reduction in their assessment, but the property is, I understand, up for sale, and hopefully when that property is sold and renovated, we'll get back to the old, if not a higher assessment. So, anyone have any question about this particular?
Which establishment is this, Andy?
It's the Falcon Center on Westchester Pike.
Okay.
So all parties have agreed, school district, the county, and the town, and the owner have all agreed on the amount of the tax assessment reduction. Any questions, discussion? The next one is a reappointment, a certified public accounting firm, our Barbicane Thornton and Company. Our township's independent auditor is in the second of and final of a 3-year period. Under law, I guess they can't serve more than 2 3-year periods as our independent auditors. So Amy and our township manager are recommending that we reappoint Barbicane Thornton and Company for do our audit for this year and 2020 and 2021. And then at that point, we'll be looking outside for a new auditing firm. And then next week, we have a number of proclamations. Actually, too many, but we'll get through them. No, it's fine. And does anybody have any questions about the proclamations? And is there any other comments or questions or discussion from the board?
Yeah, Andy, I promised some people I'd bring this up. I'd like to ask Mr. Pannoni, Dave, can you tell us when will we have a cost for the library coming up? Because some people want to have a meeting right here in this room to discuss what's going on there and the taxes that they're going to have to pay on this.
So last month, the board authorized manager and I to pursue costs for 3 different options. As we started to look into those, it became apparent we needed some direction on one of the 3 options. So we were able to get a little bit of direction. It will likely be at least 30 days for us to pull those costs together for all those 3 options. So this time, sometime in the beginning of November, we would expect to give that information to provide the board.
Okay, and then the other thing, Andy, I had was there's a couple of events coming up there couple of events this weekend that I promised some people I would mention. Billy Lake over at Haverford College or Haverford School there, 9 to 6. That's for the ALS Foundation. Billy was a Haverford Township resident, one of the best ball players in our softball league. Went home one day, and the next day he couldn't walk, and since has passed. So it's a wonderful organization. So if you can, it's 9 to 6. It's just a donation. Anything you want to give over at Haverford, go all the way in the back off of College Avenue. Second thing is Joe Hagan and the K9s will be up at the Haverford Middle School track from 12 to 3 with Steve Wilson with the barbecue pit up there, so that's a fundraiser for the Haverford Police. And also, the Grange has an open house on Sunday from 1 to 4. Grange Estate from 1 to 4. I thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy, for this community announcements. Anyone else on the board have anything to add? If not,
Adjourn.
if we stand adjourned, thank you.